Would you use a process that leads to cost overruns, missed deadlines, frustrating rework, and sometimes even failed projects? Despite its inefficiencies, most companies are stuck using the traditional waterfall process when developing websites and web apps. ProtoShare provides companies with an easy way to transition from waterfall to an iterative and agile process, and ultimately enables them to deliver a more effective product in 35% less time. Let's take a look at what happens in a traditional process. Waterfall is inflexible and assumes no changes, yet we all know that requirements always change. The process attempts to get everything right the first time with lengthy planning, but this isn't realistic. Effective development that meets the needs of stakeholders always requires iteration. Waterfall is also a front-loaded process. It begins with lengthy planning and detailed requirements gathering that eventually become a massive, old-fashioned spec document full of hundreds of pages of text-based requirements, flowcharts, and static wireframes, none of which are an effective medium for communication, especially with business and end-user stakeholders. After the massive requirements doc is assembled, it's given to the stakeholders for review and sign-off. Spec doc isn't engaging and often goes unread. More importantly, the requirements are open to interpretation and are never universally understood. 20 intelligent people could read the same requirements doc and have 20 different interpretations. Yet the doc always gets sign-off, merely creating the quote-unquote illusion of agreement. And then developers begin the long and costly programming phase of the project based on their own interpretation of these requirements. Months later, after the project is built, stakeholders are engaged because they can finally interact with working software. They now see what they do and don't want, and you'll hear statements such as, "That's not what I meant," or "I've changed my mind." At this point, it's time-consuming and costly to make changes because the code and structure of the system are already in place. Yet the team has no choice but to start again from the beginning and work through several slow, costly iterations. The massive cost of rework and waste that result from the waterfall method are well documented. There's a reason why studies show that, on average, 1/3 of a project's total time and cost is spent on rework. Similar to the wasteful process of remodeling a newly constructed house, late-stage changes have a ripple effect across the already built structure. You can remodel a newly built house, but it's time-consuming and expensive because you have to tear down and start over. But if you had identified the changes early, they would have been quick and easy to implement, requiring only an adjustment to the blueprint rather than the nearly completed structure. Many experienced companies consider this inefficiency part of the process and plan 1/3 of their budget to cover anticipated rework and waste. For others, it means the product will be late to market, over budget, or worse, compromised and missing key features. Either way, significant money and resources are going down the drain. Isn't it time someone solved this problem? As we saw earlier, the steps in a waterfall process are in an inefficient order. You get sign-off before the stakeholders understand what IT intends to build. Then IT begins building before the requirements have been validated. And you don't get stakeholder understanding or critical feedback until after the long and costly development phase. What's the value of getting this feedback early in the process when changes are quick and easy to implement? This is where ProtoShare comes in. Implementing ProtoShare into the traditional waterfall process looks like this. Instead of starting with lengthy planning and attempting to gather comprehensive requirements, you can quickly identify a few key goals and requirements and begin rapidly prototyping based on your interpretation of this information. Within hours, without writing a single line of code, you'll have built an engaging simulation with which stakeholders can interact and understand. Now your requirements are visualized and everyone is on the same page. You'll still hear, "That's not what I meant," but now you can quickly and cost-effectively incorporate this feedback into a refined prototype. You can even make changes on the fly during a feedback session. With a working simulation, you will validate existing requirements and assumptions and continually elicit new, more complete requirements from stakeholders. After several rapid iterations, continue to flesh out the prototype until you gain consensus on how the final product will look and function. At this point, everyone is on the same page. Stakeholder feedback has been incorporated, and sign-off now has actual value. Now you can confidently invest in the development phase without facing budget-killing misunderstandings, changes, and late-stage rework. Your development team has a clear visual spec from which to build, rather than an interpretation of a large, ambiguous requirements document. The annotated prototype functions as an interactive visual contract between business stakeholders and IT. Stakeholders have clearly shown, rather than told, IT what they want, and IT sees exactly what they need to build. What are the results of implementing ProtoShare? Throughput goes up while waste and rework are cut by 70%. Requirement cycle times are reduced by 40%. And overall project cost and time to market are slashed by 30 to 35%. You also end up with a more effective and usable product, which typically translates into an increased adoption rate. Outsourcing risks are also dramatically reduced as the interactive prototype acts as a clear visual contract between the business and programming team. Proto Share allows your teams to be iterative and agile in the planning and design phases, turning the shortcomings of the waterfall process into strengths. Requirements are now elicited and evolve as the prototype is refined. Simple drag-and-drop prototyping makes changes in iteration easy to implement in the early stages. Early interaction means early and rapid feedback. Quick revisions early in the process eliminate the costly late-stage changes. The ProtoShare process delivers many of the same benefits as Agile development, but ProtoShare quickly and seamlessly integrates into your existing process. An Agile method, like prototyping, recognizes that change is constant and requirements are never final. Interaction, not documentation, is needed to facilitate valuable feedback. Iterations are necessary and result in a better product. And lastly, collaboration is key. The ProtoShare process is a hybrid that brings the best of the waterfall and agile methods together into one simple but highly efficient process. Because of its proven value, ease of use, and power, thousands of leading organizations around the world have adopted ProtoShare. With a minimal investment, they quickly transition to a more efficient process that consistently develops better websites and web applications, while cutting project cost and time to market by 35%. To start an enterprise trial and learn how easily ProtoShare can improve your process, email or call an enterprise consultant today.